The snow fell heavier that night, thick and quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. In the glow of a small apartment window, a lonely CEO stood frozen on the sidewalk below, her expensive coat dusted white, her breath trembling, not from the cold, but from something far deeper. Through that glass, she saw what millions of dollars had never been able to buy her, a father and his young son laughing around a crooked Christmas tree, sharing a joy so raw and real that it hurt to witness. In that moment, her heart whispered a question she hadn't allowed herself to ask in years. Can I join you? If this story already stirs something inside you, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of human connection, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Single Dad Diaries. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Her name was Eleanor Hart, and the world knew her as a woman who had conquered everything worth conquering. She was the CEO of a global technology empire, her face gracing magazine covers, her words moving markets, her signature deciding the fate of thousands of employees. From the outside, her life looked flawless, polished like the marble floors of her penthouse. But beneath that surface was a silence so loud it followed her everywhere. Christmas had always been the hardest. It magnified what success could not fill. Another year, another empty apartment decorated by hired hands, another dinner eaten alone while the city celebrated without her. That evening, instead of riding up to her penthouse, she asked her driver to stop near a modest neighborhood she used to pass without noticing. Something about the lights in the windows, uneven and imperfect, pulled her out of the car and into the snow. Inside that small apartment lived Daniel Reyes and his 8-year-old son, Noah. Daniel was a single father who worked long hours as a school maintenance worker, a man whose hands were rough from labor and whose heart was permanently tender from loss. Noah's mother had died 3 years earlier, just days before Christmas, leaving behind a boy who learned too early what absence felt like. Since then, Daniel had made it his mission to ensure that December didn't become a month of sorrow. He saved coins in jars, took extra shifts, and turned scraps into magic. Their Christmas tree leaned slightly to the left, decorated with handmade ornaments cut from cardboard and painted with care. The lights blinked unevenly, but to Noah, it was perfect. Eleanor watched from outside, unseen, as Daniel lifted Noah onto his shoulder. Southwest he could place a star on top of the tree. Their laughter spilled into the night, muffled by glass but powerful enough to pierce her chest. She felt an ache she recognized from childhood, from a time before ambition swallowed her world. She remembered being a little girl in foster homes, watching other families through windows just like this one, promising herself that one day she would be untouchable. And she had succeeded. No one could hurt her anymore. But no one could reach her either. The struggle that had defined Eleanor's life was not climbing to the top, it was surviving the emptiness once she arrived. She had traded vulnerability for control, connection for certainty. Relationships never lasted. Friends became liabilities. Love felt like a risk she couldn't afford. Yet there she stood, trembling in the snow, undone by a father and son who owned almost nothing and somehow had everything. For the first time in years, Eleanor didn't want to retreat to her fortress of glass and steel. She wanted to step into the warmth she saw glowing behind that window. Daniel, inside, was fighting his own quiet battles. Money was tight, and the holidays only made it more obvious. He worried constantly about Noah's future, about whether he was enough on his own. There were nights when exhaustion made him question his strength, when grief resurfaced in waves that knocked the breath from his lungs. But he never let Noah see that part of him. That Christmas Eve, he focused on the small victories, the smile on his son's face, the smell of cheap cocoa simmering on the stove, the sense that despite everything, they were okay. He had learned that love didn't need perfection, only presence. Eleanor finally turned away from the window, her heart pounding as if she had run miles. She didn't knock. She told herself she was just passing through, that she had no right to intrude on something so intimate. But fate had other plans. As she stepped back, her heel slipped on the ice, and she stumbled, catching herself against the building. The sound drew Daniel to the door. When he opened it, warm air spilled into the night, carrying the scent of pine and cinnamon. Eleanor straightened, embarrassed and exposed, stripped of titles and power in an instant. What followed was not a dramatic rescue or a perfect moment, but something far more real. Daniel offered help without suspicion, the instinct of a man used to looking out for others. Eleanor, for once, didn't explain who she was or why she was there. She accepted the kindness without credentials, and in doing so, crossed an invisible line. Inside that small apartment, she felt smaller and more human than she had in years. Noah watched her with open curiosity, untainted by judgment or awe. To him, she was just a woman standing in the doorway on Christmas Eve, someone who looked a little sad. The evening unfolded quietly, awkward at first, then softer. Eleanor sat on a worn couch, her coat folded beside her, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of cocoa. She listened as Noah talked about school, about how his dad could fix anything, about how Christmas was his favorite day because it meant being together. Daniel spoke less, but when he did, his words were thoughtful, grounded. Eleanor found herself laughing at simple things, her guard lowering piece by piece. She noticed the cracks in the walls, the mismatched furniture, and realized none of it mattered. The room was full in a way her penthouse never was. As the night deepened, Eleanor felt fear creeping in. This warmth was dangerous. It reminded her of everything she had lost and everything she had avoided. She knew how quickly moments could end, how easily connections could be severed. The challenge she faced now was not external but internal, whether to retreat back into loneliness or risk staying present in a world where pain and love coexisted. For Daniel, the challenge was different but just as heavy. He sensed that Eleanor carried her own storms, and he worried about what it meant to let someone like her into their simple life. Even for a night, change began subtly, not with grand promises, but with shared silence and understanding. Eleanor stayed longer than she planned. She helped clean up, her expensive sleeves rolled awkwardly as she washed dishes in a tiny sink. She felt useful in a way that no boardroom had ever made her feel. Daniel watched her carefully, seeing past the polished exterior to the fatigue underneath. There was no pretense between them, only two adults who had been shaped by loss in different ways, finding a moment of peace in the same small space. When Eleanor finally left that night, the snow had stopped. The city felt quieter, as if it too had softened. She returned to her penthouse, but it no longer felt the same. The decorations felt hollow, the silence oppressive. She lay awake until dawn, replaying the evening in her mind, the laughter, the warmth, the feeling of belonging she hadn't known she was missing. For the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel like something to endure. It felt like something she might reclaim. The days that followed were a test of intention. Eleanor could have let that night remain a fleeting memory, a brief detour from her reality. Instead, she found herself drawn back to that neighborhood, finding excuses to walk past the building, to feel close to something real. She struggled with the idea of crossing worlds, of what it meant for someone like her to enter Daniel and Noah's life. Her career demanded focus, decisiveness, distance. Her heart, however, was asking for courage of a different kind. Daniel, meanwhile, noticed changes in himself too. He found himself thinking about Eleanor, about the way she listened, about the sadness in her eyes that mirrored his own in unexpected ways. He worried that letting her back in, even as a friend, could disrupt the fragile balance he had built for Noah. Yet he also recognized the spark of hope that had lit something inside him, a reminder that connection was still possible, that his life didn't have to be defined solely by responsibility and loss. Their paths continued to cross, naturally and without force. Eleanor began volunteering at the school where Daniel worked, a decision that surprised her colleagues and confused the media when it inevitably leaked. She insisted on anonymity, on being just another person helping where she could. She spent afternoons reading to children, evenings helping Daniel fix things around the apartment. Noah accepted her presence effortlessly, his trust a gift that humbled her. With each visit, Eleanor felt herself unlearning the armor she had worn for decades. The transformation was not without setbacks. Eleanor faced criticism from her board, whispers about distraction and misplaced priorities. Old fears resurfaced, telling her she was risking everything she had built. Daniel struggled with insecurity, with the fear that Eleanor's world was too big, too temporary for someone like him. They both stumbled, retreated, questioned their choices. But what kept pulling them back was the honesty they shared, the way they could sit together in silence and feel understood. Christmas came again, a full year later, carrying with it memories of pain and the promise of renewal. This time, Eleanor didn't stand outside looking in. She was inside, helping Noah decorate a new tree, one that still leaned slightly, because perfection had never been the point. The apartment was louder now, fuller. Eleanor had learned to let people in, to measure success not by numbers but by moments like this. Daniel had learned that asking for help didn't make him weak, and that love could grow even in the most unexpected places. As the night settled, Eleanor reflected on how far she had come. The greatest challenge of her life hadn't been building an empire, it had been allowing herself to belong. The whisper she once carried in her heart had turned into action, into presence, into a family she never planned but deeply cherished. The father and son who unknowingly saved her that snowy night had become her anchor, her reminder that wealth meant nothing without connection. If this story has reached you, if it has stirred memories of your own struggles, losses, or moments of unexpected kindness, please take a moment now to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who may need them just as much as you did. And before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what part of this story touched your heart the most, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Your words might inspire someone else who is silently standing in the cold, hoping for warmth. The snow fell again outside, gentle and forgiving, covering the city in white. Inside that small apartment, 3 lives intertwined in a way none of them could have predicted. There was no perfect ending, no fairy tale certainty. But there was something better, hope, earned and shared, glowing steadily like a crooked Christmas tree lit with love.